Okay, thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Vivid Ideas and SAMAG seminar. My name is Sophia Kuyum-Jan. I am the coordinator at Parramatta Artist Studios, as well as a SAMAG committee member. So to begin tonight's proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay respect to their elders past and present. So tonight we're here for Creative Minds, and Creative Minds has come together thanks to all of our fantastic supporters. So I'd first like to thank Arts in South Wales and the City of Sydney for their funding support. And I'd also like to thank the Sydney Opera House for this glorious venue. Thank you so much. And also, of course, thank you to the Vivid Festival for curating our seminar tonight into Vivid Ideas, which is great. Okay, so if you'd like to follow the conversation and contribute to the conversation online, please make sure to use our hashtag, which is hashtag SAMAG_2015. And also, of course, you can use hashtag Vivid Ideas. So contribute online if you can. Tonight's seminar will be emceed by Ben Strout, who's on your far left. Sorry, I had to check that one. So Ben is currently the CEO of the Biennale of Sydney and has held previous positions as an executive director at the Sydney Writers' Festival, as well as being the ED of Arts Development at the Australia Council for the Arts. So he's well qualified to lead the conversation tonight. So I might hand over to you, Ben.
Thank you.
Take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And welcome, everybody. I, too, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. It is a great honor to be a part of this panel tonight. We're talking about creative minds, and I look at the four people on my left, and I can't find four more creative and astonishingly creative minds than these four here. Put them all together, and there's 45 years of cumulative artistic directorship on stage right now. That's an astonishing amount of experience. To briefly introduce them to you, you might know them, but I will briefly introduce them to you. On my far left is Stephen Page, Artistic Director of the Bangarra Dance Theatre. Stephen has been the Artistic Director since 1991, developing a signature body of works that have seen Bangarra become one of Australia's leading performing arts companies, respected and enjoyed from remote Australian regional centres to New York. Stephen is currently curating the world premiere of Lore, and this year is directing his first feature film, Spear, premiering at the Adelaide Film Festival. Thank you, Stephen. Then next is Rosie Dennis, Artistic Director of Urban Theatre Projects. Rosie is the current artistic director there, a company that reimagines what theatre can be and who it can be for, on stage and in unexpected locations. Prior to Urban Theatre Projects, Rosie's work as a director and a performer was presented at over 25 festivals across Europe, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. She's a recipient of the Rex Cramphorn Theatre Scholarship and an Australia Council Cultural Leadership Grant. Johanna Featherstone is the artistic director and creator of Red Room Company. She established Red Room in 2003. Her poetry featured in journals, including Quadrant and the Best Australian Poems. She created a literary TV series, The Word Shed, in 2006, in partnership with the University of Western Sydney, and is an honorary associate of the University of Sydney School of Letters, Arts and Media. And Johanna received a St. James Ethics Centre Fellowship in 2008. And last is Ralph Myers, currently Artistic Director of Belvoir Street Theatre. Ralph became Belvoir's Artistic Director formally in January 2011. He's a leading set designer, having designed for Australia's major theatre companies, including Belvoir, Sydney Theatre Company, Griffin Theatre Company, Melbourne Theatre Company, Bell Shakespeare, Legs on the Wall, also worked in dance, circus, film, opera, and for Belvoir you directed the productions of Private Lives and Peter Pan, I believe. Please join me in welcoming our guests. In the promotional advertisement for this session on the website, it says, the question was posed, what does it take to be an artistic director? Clearly it just takes immense talent, that's all. But really, is there something more? you were all practicing artists, individuals, freelance artists, I would suggest, before getting involved in these companies. Did you grow up wanting to be an artistic director rather than a fireman or something else? Was this the vision? Rosie, perhaps as the most recent appointment to an artistic director role, I think you were appointed in September 2012. Can you tell us about your work and how it led you to this point over time to say, yes, being the artistic director of urban theatre projects is just the right thing for me?
Yep, thank you. So I think joined Urban Theatre Projects in 2012, late 2012, and you don't set out to be an artistic director, or I certainly didn't. I think I've had a lot of really great opportunities, and that thing of being in the right place at the right time for me has definitely means that I'm sitting here today. I got a no from VCA when I was about 28, I think. I really thought I wanted to be a director then, but not an artistic director, just, director in kind of mainstream theatre or main stage. And I got a no that at the time I was doing a lot of work in Gertrude Stein's work, and it was like, okay, this would be great, interesting to come and have someone with a lot of Gertrude Stein experience in VCA. And then I found out it was a no. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Really thought I was going to go and be a director and keep training. And then I just decided that I would train myself, actually. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be a director, I really should put myself in the shoes of all the performers that I want to work with. So how about I just go and do a series of workshops and get on the floor. Completely intimidated, working with performers who wanted to be performers, and I didn't want to be a performer. So that was interesting, just to put myself out of my comfort zone, and I'd say that that's really stayed with me as an artist and as an artistic director of urban theatre projects. In the program that I put together for the company is how to put artists or create opportunities for artists that put them outside of their comfort zone. So very much my own artistic process and practice informs and continues to inform the work that I do today. So really, I think with the first workshop I did, someone said that you're not a director, you're a performer. So that was it, really. They offered to train me. Was an improviser, and then it was just luck. And so then that became my career, actually, for 7 years. I was lucky in Perth. A festival director saw the very first show I did. Didn't make big shows at all. My background was trained as a musician, so I used to think about making work in real time, very much, improvised, but very musical. Again, background in Gertrude Stein's work. I was always interested in the musicality of language. And I was lucky, a festival director in Glasgow saw me and said, I think I'm 97% sure I'll invite you to Glasgow next year. And I said, oh, okay, great, that's good. And then she did, and that was it, really. That I hadn't ever performed in a theatre in Australia. I'd done things in studios, artist-run spaces. So then all of a sudden I was going to a really big international festival in Glasgow, something called the National Review of Live Art. And then a tour happened. I ended up going to Portugal in the same time, and also Bristol. And just like that, I had a 3-city tour. And as we know, as practising artists, when you put your work out there, it's an opportunity for people to see it, and then you get more work. So that's what happened. I got invited back the next year, and then I got, I think I had 2 international commissions, one from a house in Frankfurt and another one from a theatre in Bristol. So it was it, and I was kind of on my way, and it ended up that I was making a living out of being a solo performer. So they're not big shows, solo performer that I was writing and really directing myself. So one-man band, one-woman band. And I'd always been interested in creating opportunities for other artists. So sitting alongside my own practice, I was also curating performance nights that were cross-art form. So I'd been doing that since kind of my late 20s. And I was really interested in that, artists coming together and just having a conversation about our practice. So those 2 things fed me. And then when I was going overseas all the time, I had the opportunity to see a lot of festivals, see a lot of work, see a lot of different models. So I think that was just a very practical training ground for me of building up lots of experience of ways to do things internationally. And then I'd come back to Australia and just get about my business, really, because I wasn't a practicing artist in the same way here. I'd make work here and then I'd take it overseas. So yeah, then I was offered to go to Campbelltown Arts Centre. Lisa Havilar invited me to go there, and did I want to be the curator there of the... and I went, oh, okay, well, I've never done that formally before. I've been doing it for artist-run spaces. So that, I got a real taste for that then. And yeah, it was during that kind of tenure at Campbelltown Arts Centre, working really closely with Lisa, that I was able to realise much bigger ideas and be much more ambitious in my thinking. And I've always had a very strong connection with Western Sydney. I've worked in Western Sydney since I was, I think, 22. I'm 41 now, so that's whatever that is, 21 years, is it? 19? Anyway, doesn't matter. A long time. From kind of Auburn all the way to Campbelltown, and I love it. It's incredibly inspiring, and it's exactly where I want to be. So I think when I saw urban theatre projects come up, of course I knew it as a company, but I never imagined myself being the AD of it. And when I saw that job come up, I thought, right, well, this is the only job like this in Australia, actually. It's in Western Sydney. It's artist-led. It's site-specific. It's making things outside of a black box if I want to. So I just kind of went for it, really. So and then I'm almost at the end of my first 3-year contract. So
a great
is that
leap
a long
into the
answer?
unknown.
There we go.
Yeah, it was a great leap into the unknown, constantly out of your comfort zone. Ralph, when you were also a freelance artist.
True.
And then when you were also appointed to a company that had been running successfully, very successfully, you'd argue, for 25 years, I think was similar to urban theatre projects. And I think you yourself said when your appointment was announced in 2009, it was deemed rather unusual, as you were not a director, you were a designer. How did you get to the point of wanting to take on such a big challenge?
I think there's a confusion between the term artistic director and director. I think it's a sort of coincidence of language, really, that that they both contain that word. I'd like to see a world where writers and actors and stage managers and set designers and costume designers and lighting designers become artistic directors more often. I think the important thing is that they're artists themselves. I was a freelance designer, mostly set designer, but occasional director and occasional costume designer for 10 years before I had the job at Belvoir. I've always been interested in theatre. I was one of those kids, embarrassing children. I went, though, to drama school and to art school and studied jewellery making, silversmithing, until I realised that it was way too much concentration required. Patience, yeah, not my strong suit. So I went to NIDA and studied stage design there. It was, in a way, very good training because it's very rigorous, but it was also, in retrospect, quite a cruel place. But I was very lucky that when I graduated, every designer in Australia was designing either the opening or closing ceremony of the Sydney Olympics. Like literally. So I got a job at Griffin, and I think it was rather annoying that they couldn't get someone with at least some experience. And on the basis of that job, which now in retrospect was a very strange set design, it was very much it was really drama student-y, very student-y, kind of concept-y, rather imposing and frankly in retrospect kind of ugly design. On the back of that, then I got another job and another and so on. But really those first few years are all, of course, working on very small stages, working in Brisbane with Euron Lifshitz, doing circus. I was doing odds and sods and operas at the conservatorium with the students, and all of those kind of jobs that are really the training ground for a stage designer. Wesley Enoch gave me a job at the Sydney Theatre Company rather deliciously after I'd just been sort of dismissively told that I don't think I was a very good fit for the Sydney Theatre Company by a man eating a green apple. I remember it very distinctly. Wesley gave me a job there doing 7 Stages of Grieving. Benedict Andrews gave me a job doing a production of Endgame. In fact, the production of Endgame before the production of Endgame they just did now. Because Justin Kurzel, who had been the designer he was largely working with, had gone off to be a filmmaker, and he's now a very successful one. So I got all those sort of opportunities you get when other people aren't doing the things, and I was lucky, I suppose. I worked at Belvoir early on. I liked it very much. And I realised, I suppose, that the peculiarities of that space and the limitations of that space were things that I enjoyed as a designer very much. And it was in about 2007 or 2008 that I realised that of all of the things that I'd done that year, the only one I'd really enjoyed doing was working at Belvoir, with Neil actually, on a show where there was really virtually no set design at all. I'm a terrible advocate for stage design because I really never design anything. That job came up, and I realised it was an opportunity for... I thought that the person who should do it should be someone who did it in a very different way, and a very different kind of person to Neil, who'd been doing it for a long time before me. And that it wasn't the right thing, I didn't think, for the company to appoint someone who was going to do it in the same way. And I essentially proposed to the board when I applied that I would curate the season, not make most of the work myself as a director, but to try and bring with me a generation of like-minded artists of a similar age to me, and to essentially try and find a whole lot of new voices. For some mad reason, they gave me the job. And that's essentially what I tried to do. Although, actually I was thinking my dear nephew, who's 19, curated this whole hip-hop thing that I went to the other day, where I was by far the oldest person there by a factor of about 1,000. But it sort of blew my mind that he's this 19-year-old kid, and he's like, oh yeah, we booked the venue and we did this and did this, and I was like, the sort of, what boldness. I suppose I feel like that too. We, looking in retrospect at all the things that I now know are not possible, there was a certain rashness in that decision to do the job and to sort of launch in head first in that way, but thankfully it paid off. So now I'm an artistic director, although perhaps not as good as I was when I didn't know what I couldn't do.
The unknown just became known a bit. We'll come back to that and to your love of the space there, and how you seem to have fallen in love with the company and what it could be, even without knowing necessarily whether you would ever be and have the skills to be an artistic director. Stephen, many people assume that you are the first and only artistic director of Bangarra, which is not quite true, is it? Yeah. No. So how did it come about? How did you become artistic director?
Ooh, a bit like everybody else, I think. You don't go to university for this sort of job, or to school for it. I think mine's are, always your experiences when you're growing up. I mean, for me, it was really, I suppose I'm a Mununjali New-Knuckle man. My father's freshwater, my mother's saltwater. I come from a strong Indigenous family that celebrate their culture, even though they're very urban. Obviously, my mother and father's generations were, I suppose, assimilated from or forbidden from celebrating their culture. So it was always this hidden thing for me, and so I always had a curiosity. I think for me, it's more about a curiosity. And so I can remember from being quite young, 4 or 5, asking my mother why I was so fair and everyone else was so black. It's only because my grandfather was English. So I was a typical throwback. My brothers and sisters used to say I belonged to the milkman down the road. So, it sort of charged me more to actually celebrate my Aboriginality. I think I used to paint myself in mud when I was little, and my mother used to always catch me. So I had this odd thing about this obsessiveness with my identity, and that played a big part. And just growing up in a big family, 6 sisters, 6 brothers, all same mother and father. My mother was 17, met my father, never had another man in her life. She, it was just always, on the Bronx of Brisbane, housing conditions where most families were more than 12 kids, a couple of Aboriginal families up the road. My dad's country is near Mount Morton, Beaudesert, Bundjalung, sort of New South Wales, Queensland, Yugambeh border. So we used to always go back on country to my dad's side because his family still fished and told stories and all that. So there's a whole thing of backyard, urban lifestyle, primary school, no shoes those days, you just wore whatever you had, bare feet to school, the same Vegemite sandwich every day. Food on the table, shelter overhead, all my family, good work ethic, My mum and dad had every job, linesman, concreter, bloody everything, landscaper. Mum worked in every factory, shoe, biscuit, pineapple. All my sisters, pretty much, education, the academic side was always just overlooked. And it was really just get out there and work. I think I was doing the paper run at the age of 5 and doing a DJ course at 14 and did an acting course at 15. And my sisters were all in shoe factories and biscuit factories by the time they were 14. But the big thing at home was our backyard experiences, our kitchen, the time we had to clean up the kitchen. My sisters used to put on, kitchen performances and they'd dress us up as the Jackson 5 or the Supremes. They loved putting us in drag. And it was sort of like backyard pantomime, really. And in the kitchen, we got promoted to the laundry roof and we used to perform for the neighbours. My brother David, who's a resident composer at Bangarra, he was a child pop star, and then he sort of got us into this sort of taste of mainstream, and he was getting picked up in lemos and dropped off, and he was bringing in checks that were pretty big in the numbers, and it just was a different sort of world for us, because between 14 and 16 he was, well, maybe I'm lying, 15 to 17, I think it was like a 2-year career. He was on Paul Hogan and Countdown, and so there was this weird thing, and he bought us our first colour TV, I think, and but anything, all the sort of pop culture, the sisters were big into pop music, Beatles and Elvis. So you had this mixture of all these sorts of influence. I just was always around storytelling and the arts, an obsessive confusion about my identity. And then by 16, I think I was in year 11, I challenged my teacher why we weren't learning Aboriginal history, and I got sent to the principal's office and they suspended me for a week. And my mother said, "Oh, you're the first that's going to go through grade 12 and now you stuffed it up." And I said, she said, "If you don't get a job in a week, that's it." And so my cousin was working for the Aboriginal Legal Service in Roma Street in Brisbane. And he said, "Oh, there's some, some law clerk sort of trainee thing that you could go for." And I think I told some bullshit story and I got through. And they said, "Oh yeah, you can work here." And it was in that place. So I got to work with a lot of different black activism. That was interesting because I got to really have this black social side of experience. So there were a lot of field officers dealing with really heavy civil and criminal cases and deaths in custody, and the Tembit embassy was sort of, was brewing, and I think this was like 1980 and we're 8 years out for the bicentenary, and I was just like hearing past and present social stuff. So I was amongst that crazy, wonderful, dysfunctional family at home, and then I saw this poster of the Aboriginal on the Dance Theatre, of a young woman just in this modern Aboriginal pose, and I used to lock myself in my bedroom, and I think I used to watch Solid Gold and Dance Fever on TV and pretend I was on Young Talent Time, and I was a shocking performer, but I just like dance, I don't know, I just like the aesthetic. And I think I remember talking to Dad about, do we have shake a leg or do we stomp? And I think he was sort of rekindling things at that time. So, and then at school, I think in year 11, I was put accidentally into, I don't think it was accidental, I put my hand up and I coordinated the end of term dance production. So I just modelled it on my brothers at home and then took it back to them, to the students. But the funny thing was it was all girls, and so I was trying to get the boys in, and then they realised that I had all girls, so then the boys jumped in. So it's a bit the opposite of Billy Elliot, really. So I saw the poster pretty much. 3 months later, I was auditioned. It was 1981, at the end of 1982, and a completely different environment, Sydney. This was a college where all blackfellas from all over the country came, Torres Strait, Aboriginal, stolen, dysfunctional, rural, urban, wanting to learn more about your identity. But the weird thing is that you all came together through the medium of dance. And I just thought that was wild, there was just this diverse range of energies. And Carol Johnson was an African American. She came out in the early 70s, or could have been late 60s, and she was from Eleopamari, which is sort of a Caribbean modern take on, I suppose, like a Bangarra style. It's sort of taking Caribbean essence and mixing it with modern movement. Similar, I think there's influences of modern dance, Martha Graham, Lester Horton, Alvin Ailey Company. It was a big surge of modern dance in America, and then that was brought to Australia, and so that was sort of the sort of modern-based skills there. And then we'd have living traditional experiences that they would tap into, connections through the Black Vine, and it might get into the Central Desert or Kimberley or Arnhem Land. It seems like Arnhem Land was the chosen clan that had all the sort of dance knowledge, and were really quite generous to serve to this urban mainstream landscape in the south. And so there's a wonderful sense of Indigenous tutors or elders that had living knowledge of dance and song. This American obsessed classical modern dance form of teaching. So it was a bit like an Aboriginal fame, but an Indigenous fame. But yeah, so it was after 3 years, I just fell in love. I just thought it was a big expansion of my backyard and my family. And, you know, I was guided by a lot of great teachers, and I was always curious. I was always wanting to ask questions, and so I think that got me through it. And I sort of like the discipline of ballet, you know, like ballet, like the discipline of dance. You've got to get there early. It's like an athlete, you know, you've got to get in and condition your body, and, you know, your ego just gets driven, and, you know, it's all physical, you know, you're not sort of using the voice like an actor, I suppose, or a musician. And so you really got to tap into the internal spirit of who you are. And then learning traditional dance, you know, like traditional Indigenous dance was just the process of it, because the rhythms are different, and it's an offbeat, not an onbeat, and it's just completely different experiences of movement. In my third year, I think I choreographed a radical piece or something to Warumpi's Jail in a Puckaroo, which meant get me out of jail because the police bashed the blacks up in the bush, and I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a great piece, I'm going to do a piece for that. And then it was the first time that they actually let students in the school choreograph, because once again, big no to me, said, oh, I want to choreograph. And they said, do you know? And I said, no, how? And I said, no, I've got some ideas in my head. And I used to just practice keep after school with the students, and we used to just create stuff. Anyway, that happened, and I was an okay dancer, but I think I conned my way to get into Sydney Dance after 3 years. I think I showed off that night more when Graham Murphy come and saw one of our shows, and that was interesting. Graham Murphy and Janet Vernon came to Belvoir Street, and no, we weren't at Belvoir Street. We were at Track Theatre, which I think is now Performance Space, maybe.
Oh, Pact.
Pact.
Yeah,
it's at
Erskineville.
Performance Space. Yeah, see, I'm terrible.
There you go.
I don't know all the black stuff. But I was there, and I think they came and seen us. They came and seen us there. Anyway, I was dancing for 3 years, and then I got the opportunity to work at Sydney Dance Company, and I think it was watching someone like Graham Murphy as a choreographer, just around all that sort of competition, because when you're in a professional company, it's man for himself, and, you know, everyone wants a solo or everyone wants a duet, and, you know, and I was really taken from that diversity, especially the injection from that Indigenous knowledge. And then all the black fellas were stirring me up and saying, oh, you only got chosen because you were fair skinned. They wouldn't have chose a black fella, a blacker skinned person. And so I was just like caught in like all this, what's all this about? You know, we're getting the opportunity to be in the mainstream. And I think at that time, graduates of the school couldn't work in the mainstream because there was really nowhere for them to go, because there was this distinctiveness. And was racism and discrimination a part of this sort of stigma around, but no one was talking about it? And so I felt like a bit caught, but at the same time my ego wanted to go and learn what it was like to be a modern dancer. So I got the opportunity to dance with Graham for 2 years and travel around, and it got to 1988, and then pretty much bicentenary year. And so I was going back to the college and sort of teaching in the background and still choreographing with the kids and not telling Graham or anybody else. But and then the stigma was getting up, and people were planning there was going to be 1,000 people gathering at Hyde Park for 1988. They wanted me to coordinate with some dancers to do things. And so I just went to Graham and said, I'm going to leave because I don't want to work for a white company through 1988. I feel I need to go out there and, you know, work for my mob. He didn't quite understand. He said, you're an idiot, you're giving up this opportunity. And then I left. And between 88 and 89, I was fortunate to go back, perform with a performing group, a small little group, graduate group that performed, just did education shows, did a few trips overseas or shows for the Department of Foreign Affairs when they want black entertainment. They call the Yellow Pages and we jump. Come and celebrate Australia's identity. And then I pretty much by the end of 1989, I was the school. I actually went to the Carol Johnson of the school, and I said I want to direct the end of year show for the whole college, and they never had anyone direct a full show, and I was pretty bossy, I suppose, and I just pushed through, and I got the opportunity, and it was from that, working with all the students, creating stories, working with traditional people, working with urban, just that whole fusion and crossover. I just connected with it, and pretty much Bangarra was born that year in '89, and Bangarra is a Wiradjuri word, means to make fire, and you know, all that decade I was surrounded by Redfern and Black Theatre and Bob Mazza and Mum Shirl and Redfern Dance Theatre and a bit of black socialism, still going back to family, sorry business, wedding, coming back, mainstream. And I just had I think we're all ambitious as artists. We always want to tap into that creativity and get it out there into stories. So I think by the time 1991 came, Bangarra, saw me creating stuff, directing stuff, and just gave me a shot at it. So, and look, I had the best support. I had my family, my brothers. My brother David's been with me for all that time. My brother Russell was there with me at the time. Jakapura Manyang, and a lot of really instrumental Torres Strait and Aboriginal traditional artists that really understood. It was the first time we were crossing over, and you're working with a lot of cultural protocol and IP. You're in your own black backyard with this complexity, and you're trying to work out what is taboo, what is sacred, what is right, what is not, and it's a constant conversation about the evolution of our art form and how to articulate it in a Western world, and how do you respond in a Western system. And that filters through all black social issues, not just in the arts, right through. You look at Western Australia at the moment, it's right through. Welfare handouts constantly. Black fella being trusted to lead their own shit. So I was just lucky. I had great family, great mentors. I was cocky and confident. Well, that was my breed. Maybe it was from when I was young, and I was pretty adamant that I wasn't the milkman's son, that I was proud of my identity. And I reckon, that all my way, and we're a foot in both worlds, Bangarra. We're the only major performing arts company out of the 28 that celebrates its true heritage. It's the only major provider. We're on the end of the scale, and we get flack from backside, both sides. We don't matter where we are. And I try to support all my mob and give them opportunities down there. And look, I'm just so happy that, it's hard. I'm really humbled. It's hard for me to go, yeah, we're the leader of this, and we're the flagship black company, and we're out there. And it's bloody hard leading it. It's really hard to keep it grounded, to take its shoes off it, to stomp its feet into the earth. We keep our own creative team working together. Jacob Nash has done about 7 productions. We've created, 5 choreographers have come out of the foundation. It's 26 years this year, staff of 40, a great education program. It's all just brewed and been birthed from our own backyard, and that's where I've started.
3 of you have said you just sort of lucked into the role. There's lucky things happened along the way. You were lucky that someone wasn't available. You were lucky because of a background and what was happening around you. Johanna, you sort of avoided the whole applying for an artistic director role by just creating the company around you.
Yes.
What a great solution.
Yeah.
How was this the thing that you needed? What did you want from a company that you just didn't have before?
I don't know. Before I answer that, I was thinking about this term of artistic director and thinking it's a strange sort of persona in a way for me to have, because having set up the company, you're of multiple things all the time. But I still think that the greatest artistic direction comes from the making of a poem, which is where everything began, and it's still, I think, where I get my greatest sense of earthiness or being grounded and peace. And so the poem itself is constantly filling this space with all these different words, which are like these group of people, these sounds, or this world, and you create on this page a universe. And I think the extension of that is sort of what became the Red Room Company, was this idea of wanting to create a space, like a blank page that could be filled with ideas and people, all inspired by or informed by what poetry is, or what the poet could be, or what a poem means. And when it really, I don't really know when it first began. Like I was thinking about your story about when you're a kid and the things that you perform, in the laundry or whatever. And I remembered this game where, knee people. Does everyone have no knee? No, where you draw like little faces on your knees and you move them. And I used to have rhyming knee people. I just remembered that. So, maybe it started then. But it was definitely to do with always the poem and the potential for the poem to be something more. So knee people, it was rhyming and speaking and joy and performance and all of those things, joy and performance, are part of what the Red Room is today. And I created it out of necessity in one sense. So it began, as an idea, but it began in a little room which was actually this strange little box in a community radio station on Oxford Street in Sydney, where I'd go up and record interviews with poets about their work, and they'd come in and read it. And the show itself went from being a small, about 5 people listening to it, I suppose, to being put through community radio stations around the country, these interviews with poets and performances and questions. And I had this one project that I really, really wanted to do, which was to work with 30 Australian poets, all get them to write poems, to record them talking about the stories that went into the poems, and to make, at that time, which was really innovative, a CD of this work. And in order to do that, I had to find funds, because I really, really also wanted to pay poets. And that was one of the really big things from the beginning, starting at school, to write poems and then get some published, was you can work for 5 years on a poem and you get paid maximum $90 or something like that. If you're lucky, for a good publication, which would be like a journal or the Herald or something like that. And I kept meeting poets who were never paid for their work, and I kept thinking of all these other artists and artistic professions where everybody was paid for their work, and if they weren't, they also had the opportunity to sell it, or like I think someone was saying before here, the more work you put out there, the more work you get, which is really the same with poetry. The more poems you put out there, you don't necessarily come asking people to write more poems. But the idea, in a way, of the Red Room was also to be able to ask poets and commission poets to write new work as well, so they wouldn't have to spend, right in the darkness in the hope that someone might take notice of them, that you could actually find a poet from anywhere and commission them, pay them. So I had to get some money, which meant ultimately to form some sort of company. And, I went through this process of being auspiced by the community radio station at the time, which was a nightmare because, they thought that, we were stealing too much money from the budget to buy too many pens or pencils, and just became totally crazy. So abandoned the whole idea of being auspiced because we had no control, and set up this company, which from the very beginning was myself with three poets at the time. And I didn't classify as being what's the term, a person of good responsibility. What's the term when you have, so you like doctors can be it, teachers can be it when you're on boards. And so I had a degree, but that was not enough, so I had to find someone who had a teaching experience or something like that. Anyway, so that's what formed the actual board, and that then allowed us to create this first project, which was this CD and this radio show of all these poets. And I had such a fantastic response from all of these poets that were part of the project, and they just wanted to know when there were going to be more projects. I wanted to make more projects, and so we continued doing this radio show. And then I started to think, it'd be really great to, explore or do something more. So I sort of remember setting up this really, really dodgy website from my lounge room, which was, meant to be Australian poetry, which was clearly just me in my lounge room, updating sort of events and things like this, but also thinking of interesting projects and starting to find places like the Writers' Festival where you could propose an idea and get people to, I suppose, take poetry a little bit more seriously, which is always really, really hard. And I think that links back to the notion of the label of artistic director. Is, I don't know, that label just seemed to occur for me to be called it. And I think it probably came when you had to fill in a funding application where you have to write what your name is, and being slightly embarrassed to ever write or say poet. And so artistic director just sort of sounded maybe a little bit more formal. So I think that's how that artistic director title must have come about for me. And then as I met more people, and the Red Room has always been and will always be about people and their stories who make up the poem. So it's the poem on the page, but the people who are behind the poem are as interesting to me. So out of the radio show came this want to make more projects with different people and different sorts of poets as well, and that's when Red Room started to look into finding poets in places and spaces that you wouldn't normally expect them, and thinking about poetry not just being as a sort of whimsical, imaginative, joyful, fun exercise, of course, which it is, but looking at poetry as having a sort of social dimension too, and as being a form of communication and opening that can connect different people. And poetry just seems to be, for me, the best way to connect with other people and to find other people to connect with each other. It seems to be the form or the space in which people open up a part of themselves which is unique, and that's in the writing of the poems and in the talking of the poems, and everybody has some experience with poetry that therefore allows them to be part of the Red Room Company and to be part of Red Room projects. So different communities that we started to work with or have included, as an example of an unusual project that Red Room would do, we thought, well, let's look at a project that could find a group of poets that you might not normally associate with being poets. So we thought of truck drivers and thought, well, this is this great opportunity where you have these people driving around this incredible landscape who are dealing with these grand themes of the changing environment and everyday life and death and drugs and the law, and there would have to be poets in there. They've got so much time on their hands as well. So we thought that's a great project as well, to bring in different people from the community to challenge their perceptions of what a poet is. So we ended up just phoning trucking companies and ringing them up and saying, hi, we're a poetry company, and do you have any poets who work in your trucking company? And pretty much every single person went, yes, of course we do. And so we thought, well, we'll start with like 5 poets, and it was this partnership with Sydney Olympic Park. And so the idea was you got poems by truck drivers, and then you would promote them and publish the poetry in a big space. And that's another big thing of Red Rooms is promoting and publishing poetry in places where lots and lots of people can see it. So we thought Olympic Park. And so we said, look, I reckon we can get 5 poets for sure. And of course we had 5, and I should say we matched those 5 truck driving poets with 5 contemporary Australian poets who were already announcing themselves or working as poets even at the beginning of their careers, and Red Room continues to do that, to find sort of more traditional poets or people who have found their poetic space and voice, and then finding these other more secretive, unusual, curious poets like truck drivers. Anyway, so we had 5, but then we started to have so many more, and so we decided to make a little book of these truck driver poems, and so we handmade a whole series of books containing 30 or 40 something poems that we had, you know, great stories like a truck driver who drove his big BW into Cleveland Street to Elizabeth Street to drop off his poems to us, you know. So that's the thing with Red Room that keeps it going, is all these people get so involved in the projects, and so the artistic direction is mine in terms of the original concept of the truck poem, but it also becomes these people that add to the project. So we would never have thought about making a logbook if we hadn't had the direction from all these overexcited truck drivers. And the projects every year continue to change, and so my role as the artistic director was to think of these projects, but then also to work out how to fund them, and then to find the people who could keep making them and making them bigger. And by bigger it means trying to find ways that we can reach more people with these stories and these poems and find poets from across the country. And so right up till now, until about 5 years ago, we concentrated on making artistic projects. And I'm saying we as well because it makes it sound much bigger. Like the Red Room really was me on my own for a long time, but with this fantastic group of volunteers or generous angels who would contribute their time and ideas to our projects for free. And now we're in the space where we've been able to turn a lot of these people who volunteer into people who actually work with and for the Red Room, which is a really wonderful experience. And again, a sort of form of artistic direction that the building of the company in a financial sense and in a community sense, and all the administrative stuff is also like artistic direction to me as well. There's not this big demarcation between who's artistic and who's not in the work that we do, because pretty much everybody who has worked and works within the Red Room is a practicing poet as well, or has an interest in and love for poetry. And then the final sort of part of the artistic direction in terms of how it found me, or I guess how it unfound me, is in the last 4 or 5 years we've developed our education component to the work that we do, which was always something that I had, that I wanted to do from the beginning, which was take the work that we do into schools and communities who wouldn't normally get access to poetry or the chance to make poetry projects or to have their voices heard. So we set up this concept where you would have the artistic project that we created, like the truck drivers, and you would then take elements of it and turn that into education resources for students. And so the students would have inventive ways to actually look at poetry and discover poets. So they would get to explore truckers and the trucking industry and start to read some of the poems written by truck drivers, plus they'd look at the poems that we commissioned by contemporary Australian poets who are living, alive poets, not just dead white males, which, you know, was basically and still is a lot of the poets on the reading list. So we built this program up, and it's grown to be, I obviously think, the best education program for poetry in the country. But it just grew, and again, like the rest of the Red Room, it kept growing because there was a demand and a want for people to work with it and use it. That doesn't necessarily mean they pay for it, by the way. And so the education program in schools has sort of flourished and has seen these artistic projects grow again. And that's the other side of the artistic direction, is I've sort of hopefully been forgotten by the time that they reach the schools, because the students reinterpret the projects themselves, plus they write in their own voices all of the new poems that again sort of recreate the project. And the other side to the artistic direction in the education component was the work that we started doing about 3 years ago in correctional centres, where we take poets into correctional centres and the poets perform their work and read it, and we run workshops where the students in the class write their own poems. And so again, everything mirrors the original arts project that we've created, which is, and that idea of the beginning of a poem or artistic direction being on a blank page. You start with nothing and then you just fill it with the words and the people and the stories, and the artistic direction is, I suppose, about the dream or the original idea, and then it just, flourishes from there.
4 very different stories, but you are now all referred to as artistic directors in company structures of varying sizes, but of company structures. Was that a total surprise to you? 3 of you, I think, sit on the board, formally as board members. Some are CEOs, formally within the company structure. I heard a colleague, an artistic director colleague, say that being CEO of the company meant that they were spending less than 50% of their time on the art and more than 50% of their time being managers. Is this something you found? What are the initial challenges that you found in being in a company structure? You finally created one, but being in a company structure. Ralph?
Of course, there's no training for that. I am with our executive director, Brenna Hobson, co-CEO, which incidentally I think is a very good model. There's absolutely no training to be an artistic director, so it is a kind of a surprise. For me, perhaps as someone who's spent a lot of their time sort of cutting up little pieces of cardboard and building little models, I found it initially very exhausting how much personal interaction you have to have. Seriously, like you're working in an office. I've never worked in an office.
Right, yeah.
You know, there's all these people expecting you to, answer their questions and be nice and
lead.
It's hard.
Yeah.
You have to learn on the job, as well as kind of looking or trying to, as hard as you can, to look like you know what you're doing. I did. I found that all. I found it extremely interesting. Boards and people and bureaucrats and sponsors and all that. It's interesting, but it's like nothing I'd ever done before.
Rosie, you're formally a CEO of the company. Don't sit on the board, I think, like some of the others do.
No, I'm a board member.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
And do you agree that this challenge of being the artistic director, being the CEO, is actually drawing you away from some of that passion you described in wanting to be an artistic director?
You'll always have the ideas. You've got to learn to work differently and manage your time differently, I think. I agree with Ralph. I was working as an independent solo artist. So coming in and, working with a team of people, it was really different. Again, the amount of time that you spend, just in meetings with the team, you've got to also factor that into your day. And if you're not used to that, then that's something you've kind of got to learn, which sounds maybe odd, but was something that I wasn't used to. But yeah, you manage your time really differently. I also have 2 kids, so it's not only coming into the office and being, being in the office environment with the team, as well as making the work, or working with other artists. It's also kind of having a life as well. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's you learning all the time, and you absolutely make mistakes, and you just hope that you can inspire the team of people that you work with in a way where they're forgiving of when you make those mistakes. And I think that's, I don't think any level of experience, you'll always make mistakes, because that's just it. And if you're putting yourself out there and trying new things and having conversations that are with people who maybe don't know you or aren't familiar with the work, then that'll just happen. So you can't be afraid to make mistakes, but I think working as an independent, your mistakes become really visible, and you're sharing those with a team as well. So you've got to really I think you were saying ego. You've got to really park your ego to the side, and just, you're very public, and you've just got to embrace that and go, that's okay, actually.
And is being on the board an important part of being an artistic director? Is that a new thing? Did you start that way? Did it develop over time that they said, I think we should have this AD on the board?
Belvoir,
not every company does it.
Always been on the board, as far as I know, at Belvoir. In fact, like all companies, the number of artists on the board at Belvoir has decreased, essentially, historically over time. And that's part of a kind of broader change in the composition of boards across companies, really. I think it's vitally important the artistic directors on the board.
Is it a conversation? Where does the conversation for strategy happen within the company? And I guess most interested in this in terms of those where your time with the company will be, is it 5 years by the end of your tenure? And as you said, Rosie, you've been appointed for 3. You will perhaps be coming up for another term, as compared to the 2 of you who have been, Johanna and Stephen, who have been with the company for over a decade. Your company. Where does the change come from? Does it come from that conversation at board level? Does it come from internal staff challenging each other about a new place to go? Does it come from your relationship with your executive or general manager, who's clearly a part of managing that workload and managing the financial responsibilities of the company? Where does change come from, particularly in a company where there are certain things that can't be changed? Perhaps, Stephen, there's a location to country and to stories of elders that you articulate. How do you see change?
Yeah, look, I think it's a myriad of things, and I think Rose was just talking about the management of time and listening and communicating, and strategic is really just about how much you listen and share, and executive directors and chairpersons, and really making the time to communicate your ideas and what you're dealing with. It's only been probably, what have we had, 5 chair people in Bangarra, up to our 5th one, and I think we're up to our 5th since I've been there, or been there from the start. General manager, so it's just evolution, it's just time and change. Bangarra didn't become a major performing arts company until 97. It was established in 91. That was quite a big jump. we were project education based before that, grassroots, Redfern Police Youth Citizen Club, really grassroots community, directing the pork eating speech in '93 at Redfern Park, and we were always on the call, not just to perform a show. We were tapping into all facets. And that cultural pressure, where you always got this foot in each world, it does distract. And I think you do need those separate culture elders. You do need those other great black and white. And Bangarra has 9 board members. Was it 9? Yeah, it's decreased a bit. Non-Indigenous, and it's 50-50, So I think for me, we had a previous general manager that was a little bit different style and robust, and that sort of wasn't the style. But I think you've got to find your way over the time. But at the moment, it's in good, steady hands. We've got a plan up to 2020, and you sort of go, shit, when I'm going to get off this sushi train and do something else. But it's just healthy, and it's vibrant, and it's great when you see things start to move. So I think for me, as I've gotten older, I did drop my ego when I got the job. I didn't hang on to my ego. You had to learn that really quickly, because you're dealing with different types of temperament, of personalities and people. And there's some cultural sensitivities. I mean, we're still over 25 years sorting out our IPs for the company. What's our own intellectual property? My brother David creates an original score every year. That's like a pop star putting an album, Kanye West putting an album out every year, And the pressure on him, and you're working with traditional singers and language and, the communities. Last year we went out to, 9-week tour to communities, basketball courts, football fields, Central Desert, Umawa country, like Torres Strait. And these are families from generations from when I first met in the early 80s that are still passing down who we are as a Bangarra. And it's those personal relationships, connections, and so there is a wonderful myriad of diversity there, and it's all of the above. And I just think the honesty in that process and the trust in that just helps shape and mould who you are as a foundation.
And Johanna, where do you evaluate yourself to know where the next new thing has to come from? I think both Ralph and Rosie had said that they'd sort of proposed new visions, a new plan for the companies when they applied. But this is your company. How do you challenge yourself to the new?
I think it's by listening and working with different people all the time, I think is where the challenge comes for me and the Red Room Company at this stage, not so much from the board. And there's different types of challenges. So in terms of artistically and creatively, one of the greatest reliefs in a way has been the last 2 or 3 years, and then the last year, where we finally got a structure, I think, that fits the Red Room Company at the moment, where we have managed to be able to pay a full-time education manager, and we have an incredible executive director. And all these labels, by the way, are just labels, again, that we put on because they, I think, fit business cards, and it helps the outside world understand, really, they're just excellent people in the company that fit and make the magic, when it's magic, happen at this point in time. And the challenges come from these people bringing in new ideas, and from the poets that we work with and what's happening within the poetry community. And if you create a project and the project doesn't work because the poems come back and they're not really great poems, then in a sense that tells you need to do something different in the next project. And one of the most interesting things for me has been this enthusiastic response from the community to more performance poetry now, and stuff that's not on the page and that is off the page, and is about speaking and literacy and poetry as art as well, which comes out of a lot of the work that we do in the prisons and the schools. And so the vision of what I had sort of last year or 2 years is irrelevant now, because the types of poets that we're working with are changing the direction of the Red Room Company, and in a sense it is speaking to the audience. The people that come to our shows now, or the events that we do, don't necessarily want to see poets reading from a page. They're really obsessed with this idea of story, which I know is now just being wrung by the neck. What everyone says, storytelling. But it's true with poetry that the performance of it is something that people now, I think, are really responding to in poetry. And so that sort of has come from the community somehow. What poets say, what people say, what you pick up in dreams, that is picked up through listening in the day. And then the other side of what shapes the Red Room Company. And there's a sort of a sadness when I think about this, but I think that's the reality, comes from where we have to get the money to make these projects happen if we want to continue to pay the people who are involved. And so the artistic direction is always having to challenge itself about what is true to the nature of the poem and to poetry and to what we want to do. So, philanthropic foundations require a certain type of evaluation for the work that you do now. So even when I'm thinking of a project that we're doing, there is always this part of me in my head that thinks about how can we evaluate this sort of program, which is what I say, which is what makes me feel sad, but it's there. And when I think of an artistic project, I think fantastic, and then I think it's too expensive, or we won't be able to justify the marketing budget for that. So I have to rethink of maybe how I use that story or that piece of language, and then it becomes really, really sad. And the bolshiness with which I thought of Red Room projects in the beginning, which is when they were really cheap, and there were only a few people doing, you could just sort of feel like you could do anything. Whereas now there's this, there's a sense of shackles, but I also think that's just growing up and maturing and responsibility for all these other people that you work with. So with that growth is that sort of, I wish that, there was no responsibility.
We're in the backyard on the roof of the laundry.
Yeah, I want my knee people back.
Yeah, you need people. Maybe that's your next project.
Yes, yep.
I want to make sure we leave enough time for some questions from the audience after this, so I'm going to sort of wrap in a question, three questions into one at the end here. One of them is, how do you know, and maybe you've already answered this for yourself, at least Ralph, how do you know when it's time to leave as artistic director of the company? And then, can you see yourself, if you leave, as artistic director of another company? And when you look back on your time, what will you use to measure whether you've been a success as an artistic director? Takers?
Subject close to my heart at the moment. I always said I would do 5 years, and I did. I suppose there was part of me that was that thought I may want to stay on for a long time. I personally think it's not a bad thing to have short tenures for artistic directors. There are very few jobs, really, and the more diversity of voices we have, the better.
Do you think that's a different art form by art form, by the way?
Yeah, and I think there are people like Stephen who's had the kind of cultural impact and made the kind of change to this nation and to the culture of this nation that somebody couldn't have done in 5 years, a flash in the pan. Like me, could not hope to have made the kind of change that he's done over that time. So I think it's horses for courses. But it felt like what the task that I needed to do, I did, I suppose.
And how do you look back and measure whether you had a success?
Every single show we've done has been an enormous success.
There you go. Okay.
According to you.
I've read that somewhere too. And would you want to be artistic director again?
Not right now. But I imagine I would in some after I've had a little lie down.
Find a new space.
Yeah.
Yeah. Johanna?
The evaluation of whether it was successful, my tenureship as an artistic director of Red Room, if I was to leave or to die or whatever, again, it returns to what I said at the beginning about my life in the Red Room has not just been artistic direction of individual projects or poems. It's about the company itself. So I would have to say that it would be that I could leave and the company would continue to run, and it wouldn't fall in a heap in this puddle with everyone going, oh, what a loser organisation. It was just some megalomaniac who ran it. And then now that she's gone and dead, we were right. It's never going to last beyond her. It was all about her. That would be the worst case scenario that might happen, would be that I would go and leave and it would flourish doing things differently to how I did it before, at the same time, the poem would continue to be the most important thing. The making and the crafting of the poem and the sharing of that poem with everybody would hold it together. And if the company can do that, then I'll feel really, really happy. And the projects and the poems that are written and the experiences of people working with Red Room is really important. But it's important that it goes on when I'm not there. And in particular, like poems are so durable, and good ones last forever. And so I don't worry about the poems or the making of the projects, but I worry more about the education work and how we can continue to take poets and poetry into these different spaces. And so that would be the second part of my answer, would be the artistic direction, life of Red Room. I would be happy if we could get poetry to be part of students and teachers' lives in a really exciting way around the country, working with all sorts of different poets, with all sorts of definitions of poetry, and it was natural. You know, it wasn't something that teachers had to struggle with or fight for. The idea of poetry in a poem as your everyday life in school was something that you would be open to be able to talk about, and you could grow from it. And in terms of would I want to be artistic director of another company, I really don't think so. I think that my love has been actually setting up the company that is Red Room, it has been and it is exhausting, but that's only because I'm thinking of the word company as something that's similar to Red Room. Whereas when I think of something that seems maybe a little bit less tiring or manageable, like a project, then I get really, really excited to go into somewhere totally different. But I also like the idea of not having to do something similar. So another arts company, for example, in the way I think I potentially could always compare it to Red Room or what I did there. Whereas if like I had the opportunity to go and direct, I don't know what.
A writers' festival.
Something I was thinking more like go into a mine and do a project in a mine that was
Close.
Or a truck company.
yeah, so something that was different. You know, poetry would find its way in, but it would be really fresh. So I think, maybe if you said, yeah, I've got a really interesting project in a mine, I'd go more so than a writers' festival, I think.
Look on Arts Hub for that one. Rosie.
I wanted to answer who sets strategy, you know, but
sorry.
but no, that's okay. That's okay. But no, because I think it changes all the time. I think it's lots of different kinds of conversations with board and with your staff, and also, you know, with external circumstances as well. So
Please do.
so I think. You know, and it is reflecting. I mean, I think I mentioned to you on the phone on the weekend that how I would answer that question last week, what I'd like to leave for urban theatre projects, to how I'd answer it today. I'm not able to really fully put it into words yet, because I really don't know. I love urban theatre projects, and I actually am really passionate about the whole industry, nationwide, and what we contribute for and with each other. I think that what we offer, and what I hope that I'm able to leave when I leave urban theatre projects, are a whole bunch of folks in Western Sydney and not, Northern Sydney, Eastern Sydney, Inner Sydney, the Shire, but come to our neck of the woods and see some work that's of a different scale, that sees work that is in a backyard, that sees work that's been made over 2.5 years by having conversations with people about their everyday, with truck drivers or with cafe owners, or, you know, with leaders of particular organisations or not. So now when I think about how I'd like to leave urban theatre projects when I leave, is I just want to leave it in a healthy place, you know, and make sure that it can continue to make the work that it's been making for 32 years. Because I think what companies like urban theatre projects offer, and a lot of my peers and colleagues in the small to medium sector, and also as an independent artist, I went overseas to make work and to have a living, which was really great, but actually I should have been able to do that here, because the work that I was doing over there really, it's got to be part of the conversation here in Australia. So I hope that I can leave it financially stable. I hope that I can leave it in a place where the person who comes and sits in the seat that I've been sitting in feels like that they can dream big and actually that they can do anything, because they've got a really supportive board, my chair's over there, who embrace big ideas and encourage me always to dream. And that's why I think strategy comes from all different places. You know, you put an offer on the table and, you know, if you've got people who can back you in your corner to give you an orange quarter when you're down, that's a good thing. So ahead of today's session here, I had a really great meeting with 2 of my board members and my general manager as well. And, you know, we're going to keep going on because we know we're onto something at Urban Theatre Projects. And we feel really passionate. And I sit here tonight and I think, well, what else can I do, actually? Because the work that I've made as an artist always has been about thinking about other artists. So I take that, actually, where I find myself tonight and the last couple of weeks, really as an opportunity of what else can we do at Urban Theatre Projects for my peers and for other artists. And I don't know if we'll be able to, because, you know, I'm very altruistic, you know, but I've got to believe that we're in it together, you know, and that I wouldn't be here without, you know, and the work that I do and Urban Theatre Projects does wouldn't be here without the work of Red Room or Belvoir, Bangarra, STC, Griffin, you know.
Thank you, Rosie. You answered those 3, plus the one from before, so you do very well. Very well. Stephen.
Oh, look, everyone's got a different journey. Yeah, I get asked all the time from the media, when am I jumping off? And, you know, to explain the complexity in the company, and all our initiatives have been brewing since the time I've been there. And, you know, I've always tried to be really honest. I've given up my personal life to be so passionate about this company. And, you know, that fire and fate, or that experience and desire is probably my fate in life. And, you know, in the end, hopefully I can go back to my mum and dad's country and do a story from my own backyard and do it on my dad's land. But I'm long seconds away from jumping off, but there could be very long seconds. But at the same time, I've got really great people in my own backyard at Bangarra who are quite capable to continue the cultural creative philosophy that is the legacy of Bangarra. So, you know, the good old spirit guide will tell me when to get off, not the bloody media.
And with that, can I ask the organisers what time we have for questions from the audience? We have perhaps 10 minutes, 7 minutes,
Artists
3 questions.
can talk, can't they? They're all storytellers.
15 minutes.
15, fantastic. Yeah. Okay, we will, before we wrap up, and I want to thank the panelists, but we will throw this open to questions from the floor. And assuming there are, I can see one over here. Looks like Brian.
Hi, the stories were fantastic. Thanks very much for that. I'd like to direct a question at Ralph. Ralph, you talked about the school that you learnt at after you went to school, which was basically a lot of the companies like Griffin and Legs on the Wall, etc., and how that was really important to you. And I remember when you first came in, you said that Belvoir is the centre of independent artists in, or indie performance in Sydney. And I was a bit taken aback by that. But then I thought about it another way, and I think that could be either, you know, an arrogant stance, or it could be a stance where you're actually saying that we need innovation like this continually to survive. So fast forward to these past few weeks, and I'm wondering why Belvoir hasn't said anything about the attack on the small to medium sector, why you haven't released any statement I remember looking at that and I thought strategically, well, we've probably got a grant application in there to the federal body that you're just keeping your head down to protect that. That's the question I want to ask is, how difficult is it in this current environment to navigate these kind of politics, given that they're fairly intense, I would imagine?
Thanks, Brad.
Well, like everybody, this came from left field, and like everyone, we don't know any more about really the detail of the changes that are happening. We're waiting for the guidelines to be released. So it's very hard to know precisely, I think, what the consequences are going to be. The answer to your second question is it hard to be politic? It's part of the job. You know, we sort of exist in a reality, not in a fantasy. That's, you know, like, does that answer your question?
There was an interesting part about how, and I was interested in was there a company conversation in any of the companies between management and artistic director looking at this and saying, you know, is this a business opportunity? Is this a strategic opportunity? We just need to wait and see. Or was it a board conversation? I think Rosie's articulated there was a board conversation. Was it at management level or board level?
We were just frustrated because we'd spent a huge amount of time on an application to the Australia Council with a 6-year partnership. There was just a sense of how tiring, another application, but it felt a little bit like another application we've spent so much time in and we might not get. And I think, echoing Ralph, without knowing more about it, it's really hard to issue any sort of statement or anything like that, and obviously a sense of fear about that too. But so it's very much for us wait and see, and there is a sort of, again, like it's enervating because it's, for us, it's literature. Literature always gets hardly anything. So it was just like, damn, we've got to, it's happening again. But Red Room's only survived because we've had, like everybody says, different types of funding from different types of people at different types of times, and we have to adapt the projects based on what we can afford to do, and occasionally we do it the other way around, and occasionally that works too. But at the moment it's like, sort of strangely expected.
Yeah, look, same thing. I mean, with conversations with chairs, and we have a board meeting this week, and the chair and our ex-general manager spoke strongly, and I deal with a lot of it's terrible to say, but I mean, I'm always involved in other Indigenous social affairs. You look at WA, look at Indigenous communities, welfare handouts change constantly, programs change, labels change, so it doesn't surprise me. I'm a lefty, and I think the Liberal government's done a lot better than the Labor government, but anyway. In saying that, like you said, there's an uncertainty. You don't know these guidelines. You don't know what's expected in this program of excellence fund. So, it's best to just sort of sit back and wait and support. I mean, there are other peers in the industry, especially in the dance community, that I've spoken to. A lot of it's been in our own, keep saying the fucking backyard, but a lot of it's been, talked about. And there is a sense of knowing the frustration out there. But I don't know. I remember Kate Blanchard and Andrew Upton, I've spoken to them once when they wanted to make the precinct down at Pier 4 the place to go to. And before Sydney Theatre became, was it Rose Packer now? Yeah. Barangaroo there as well, People think Bangarra's moving to Barangaroo. But anyway, what am I going sidetracked for? Because I kept saying, I look at the recognised campaigns on TV, and I just don't think we do an arts campaign well enough. I don't think we all get together and just get on the public faces and show every storytelling form, and I don't know, conversations to be had. I just think the Australian Council, Brandis, the Ministry, I just don't know. I don't know what sort of conversations happen. At what sort of level do you go and have a cultural, creative handshake? I don't know. But anyway, let's wait and see.
Thank you. Other questions? Back there. Thank you.
Hi, quick question. Artistic director roles tend to be contract. Do any of you have succession plans? Are you involved in that process? Do you think it's important to be involved in that of what's coming next? I mean, Ralph, you spoke about 19-year-old cousin or a nephew. I mean,
Yeah,
are you looking at the future? Are you involved in that for the companies that you're in?
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. We're talking about it at the moment. It's always a constant conversation, especially with Bangarra because of its uniqueness and its distinctiveness and what it does, and how it's been set up from a blank canvas almost. We're constantly aware of the succession plan, and my ego's got to step aside, and that's fine. And it's just weighing up all the initiatives and how they're playing out. But yes, there is a succession plan, and as I said, it's healthy. The people are around, and we sort of know between the board and myself and the governance of the board how that's going to play out. So yeah, there is sacred conversations. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. Right. Anyone else? Fine.
Definitely think about it. I mean, it's been a conversation we've had as well in the last probably 6 months in relation to company structure. So, yeah, I mean...
I think it's really important to have people who could potentially be the artistic director of... we have resident directors at our company, and I think that those people who've occupied those positions, when they leave, those jobs could well be the artistic director of any number of companies. So I think it's beholden on us certainly as major performing arts companies to have people within our companies seeing how they work, understanding the ways that you can really make them sing, but also the sort of pitfalls of them from the inside, being paid to do that. But as for actually appointing a successor, I think that's extremely dangerous. Yeah.
And I would say as well, I don't think for Red Room necessarily when I'm not there, it'll be actually another artistic director. I don't think we actually know yet quite what the form is. I think with the types of projects that we do and where language is going, I don't know, I don't think it's going to be the same model of having one person. I think it's going to be different voices doing different things, however that's all umbrellaed or kept together. I'm not sure, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be, there's going to be a throne and someone else is going to come and go, hi. I don't know.
Time for one last question. Is there one last question? Oh, back there.
Hi, thank you for this evening. My name's Renee. I am a chairperson on a regional arts board, multi-arts organisation. My question to you is, I have a fantastic artistic director. What's your advice to me in terms of providing him the best support that I possibly can as his chair?
So you've been recipients of good advice and support from your board, as I think you've all articulated at some point. Can you sort of describe what that good board did to make you feel supported as an artistic director?
I can certainly say this is probably not what you want to hear, though our board, our chair committed to funding a 3-year position within the company and put the money on the table.
Yeah.
That was probably
helped, huh?
one of the best things that the chair did. So I would encourage you to do that.
Don't panic, I think is good advice.
And patience.
Things work, things don't work. Certainly, it's not happened at our board, but I've seen many instances where boards panic and act rashly. Some things don't work. Be kind of patient and supportive if you can, I think.
The other thing I was going to say too, which is I think, and this is from the generosity of the chair, but at the times where he's been almost stronger, more instructive and more likely to say no, have been the most helpful, which probably seems really obvious, but there was a tendency, I think, at the beginning to just say yes to a lot of the ideas or things and suggestions in the way the company went. But as he became more experienced, and I think our relationship deepened, he was more firm, I guess, in his ability to drive things. And that's greatly appreciated because I definitely don't know what I'm doing all the time. And I think everyone feels that in the company.
I would just say Make time for strategic conversations. We've shifted how our board meetings are run, and we make sure we've got a chunk of time for strategic conversation, which is really great. To have that check-in every month or so, and also, not to get involved in the day-to-day running of the company. Trust that the artistic program is fitting in with the strategic vision. If the board's been part of that strategic vision, then the AD or the director will work to that as well.
Yeah, all of the above. I think. I'm really. As I said before, I think it's just the management, general management, and the chair and yourself just constantly checking out your values, checking out your purpose, constantly brewing the same story or evolving it. I like Ralph said, I don't think, you just got to be totally optimistic, and the patience is right. I mean, I think it's, optimistic and always being aware there are worse things off in the world than I suppose what we do. It's terrible to say that. I think when Nepal happened, I was so ringing around everyone donated, and we were going to I think we do one of our shows and sending money and collecting people, and I kept saying, wouldn't it be great ringing the Australian Council and say, we're going to take 3 months off and I'm not going to do any activity and we're all going to go and help. Ring Red Cross or something. I don't know, like you just, I just always think of where I've come from and, had nothing hardly, and you just appreciate. And I think the governance as well and the support that you have, I think you just always got to think that you have that there and just make work for what you have at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks,
I
Steve.
might become a monk. I don't know.
The next 5-year plan. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that's all the time we have for tonight. I want to thank you for coming along. I want to thank SAMAG and Vivid Ideas for sponsoring this event, and I particularly want to thank Stephen Page, Rosie Dennis, Johanna Featherstone, and Ralph Myers. Please join me.
Thank you so much, Ben. I'd like to reiterate your thanks. And of course, would you also please join me in thanking Ben Strout for being a great MC tonight? So thank you all for coming along to our SAMAG seminar tonight. We do these every month, and so our next one is on Monday the 29th of June, back at our regular venue, which is the Australia Council for the Arts, and that one is called Don't Mention the C Word, the debate about collaborations between arts organisations. So book in and come along to that one if you're interested. So thank you again to our speakers, our MC, to all our supporters, and have a great evening. Thanks for coming.